Boisai, welcome back. Women learning Torah. What a beautiful mitzvah. What a horrible avera. What is it? Mutter, Asur, Parav, Achiv. What's going on? So are women chayiv to learn Torah? So is it a mitzvah seishes man grama? No, we're supposed to learn Torah all the time. And if we're supposed to learn Torah all the time, my starting off point would assume that women are chayiv in limud Torah. However, the Gemara in Kadddish quotes a brisa, and the brisa Kaddushin Chav Tes Amid Aleph, I believe, or was it Amid Beis? I'm not sure. It says a father is chayiv to teach his son Torah. The brisa is clearly implying that you're chayiv to teach your son Torah, but you are not chayiv to teach your daughter Torah. Dafka the son. Now the Gemara on Chav Amid Beis asks, okay, so how did the brisa know you have a chayiv of teaching your son and not your daughter? And answers with a pasuk, Gzeres HaKosav Miyat V'Lamatom Es B'neichem. And we're supposed to specifically teach your sons B'neichem V'loi B'noiseichem. You have a mitzvah of teaching your sons Torah, not your daughters. So, yes, in theory, you might expect that the mitzvah is to davka teach your sons, but based on a miyat from the pasuk, we have a chiyuv specifically to teach the sons and not the daughters. But once again, from this source, it doesn't indicate that there's any negativity in a woman learning Torah. It just shows that she is not mitzvah. She's not commanded in the mitzvah, and she is not obligated to learn Torah. Now we have a Gemara in Soita. It's Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph is where it starts, I believe. And the Gemara discusses a guilty Soita. Generally the way that it works is when a Soita, a woman that is accused of adultery, and she goes and she's been warned, and then she fits the qualifications to drink the mei Soita, the water that proves whether she really was unfaithful or not. So she drinks this water, and if she was unfaithful, if she was taka mizana, then she dies. And that's how it works. And by the way, just derech agav, interestingly enough, the man who she was unfaithful with, he also dies at the same time that she drinks the water. Just interesting. Okay. Now the Gemara says that there could be a circumstance where she'll get to live for another 2 or 3 years. There could be a schus that allows her to live for another 2 or 3 years. Then the Gemara asks, it's a little bit, not the easiest Gemara to read, but the Gemara asks, and what schus is it? I mean, Torah, she's not commanded in Torah. But mitzvah, apparently the schus of a mitzvah will not be enough to save her for 2 or 3 years. I'm not clear exactly why that is, why the schus of mitzvah won't be enough. Apparently the schus of Torah is a higher level schus. And the schus of mitzvah seemingly would not be able to save her. So the Gemara simply answers, the schus of Torah, even though she's not commanded in it, that's the type of schus that could keep her going alive for 3 years. So if you want to know, how can you get a Soita, a woman that was Mizana, to live for an extra 3 years? Let her learn some Torah, and she'll be able to live for another 3 years. That's the schus. But one thing you see, derech agav, is you see the schus of Torah is stronger than the schus of mitzvahs. Fine, gewaldig. Now the based on this little Gemara, Ben Azai said, "Chayiv adam lelamdoi bitoi Torah." Ben Azai has a knack of chedushim. Ben Azai is the one that never got married because he just couldn't separate from learning Torah. He has his own unique, I guess, way of looking at things. So now that we see from this Gemara the schus of Torah, And we see how it's helpful for this woman. And in addition, I think the way that some Rishonim explain it is the woman should understand that even though she was Mizana, she's being saved because of the Torah, not that the Meisaita doesn't work. So therefore, Chayev, not optional, Chayev, one is obligated to teach their daughter Torah. Rebbe Eliezer responds, what are you talking about? This is a very famous line. Whoever teaches their daughter Torah is teaching them Tiflis. So that's a wild thing. We don't. What exactly is Tiflis? I haven't translated it. The reason why I haven't translated it yet is because it's actually machlokes how to translate it. But everybody agrees it is not a very good thing. Hold on 1 second. I'm just shutting this door. Yeah. Okay. So whoever goes and teaches them their daughter Torah, it's like to teach them Tiflis. So what's the machlokes? Also, interesting to note, Rebbe Eliezer doesn't say usher to teach your daughter Torah. But he says whoever does it is teaching her Tiflis. It seems to be it is definitely not advised. Now what is this Tiflis? The way that Rashi explains it, it's some form of like cleverness or slyness that will lead to promiscuity. Yeah, was that the right word? Wrong word. It will lead to promiscuous behavior. It will lead to maybe znus or something like that. Don't teach her how to learn chaps and be clever. Because you can learn from Torah Sheval Peh, you can learn this cleverness. And it's not good for a woman to learn these things. And a man, I guess, I don't know, I guess a man needs it, maybe needs it for his Torah life, needs it for his business life, I don't know, I mean, obviously not to be in a non-yasher fashion, but, you gotta know how to work out the chops, you gotta how to find the loopholes in the IRS code, you know what I mean? Fine, Beseder. So, that's how Rashi explains. Don't teach her Tiflis. It's going to be this cleverness, this slyness, which will lead her to bad places. Whereas the Rambam's way of learning and other Rishonim is it's like frivolous. It's to nothingness. It's going to lead to bad conclusions, but it's not going to be Torah. It's going to be getting things wrong. And you don't want to set her up to get things wrong. We'll explain in a little bit greater detail in a minute. Okay, there is a Yerushalmi in Saita, Yud Testament Aleph. A woman asked Rav Lezer or Rav Elazar, I think there's different girsas, why were there 3 different punishments given to those of the Egel, those that did Averis for the Egel? There were 3 different punishments that were given. Why? What's Pshat? Seemingly a pretty good kasha. Why? If they all do the same thing, why are they getting different punishments? That's a reasonable question. You know what Rav Elazar, you know what he answers? He says, Chachma of Nashim is with knitting. Don't start asking me Torah Dika questions. Stick to the knitting. It would say nowadays, stay in the kitchen. You learn how to cook. And then the Gemara Yerushalmi has a wild line. It says, Yisrafu divrei Torah va'al yimsaru l'nashim. Torah should rather be burnt than given over to women. That's a pretty intense line. So I don't know if this Rebbe Eliezer and Rebbe Elazar is the same person or not. It would fit well if it is the same person in the Bavli and the Yerushalmi, because once again he says teaching Tiflis. Over here he said it's a consistent theme of it being a bad idea. Okay, so and by the way, the Gemara seems to go with Rabbi Elazar over Ben Azai in the idea of teaching Torah is like teaching Tiflis. Now, we see that women are not chayav to learn Torah. On one hand, you would assume that means, you're not chayav, but why should it be different than any other mitzvah? They're not chayiv to shake a lulav. They're not chayiv to hear shofar. But they could. And if they go and decide to shake a lulav, they get a mitzvah. Yes, Mechalikas Ashkenazim, Sfardim, whether they should make a bracha or not on that shaking of the lulav. But either way, let's just keep it simple with Ashkenazim. She decides to go and shake that lulav. She could. Yes, she's not chayiv. That doesn't mean that she can't do it. And that would be my expectation. But for some reason, which is not clear, we have these Gemaras speaking strongly against it. Once again, it's like teaching Tiflis, or the Yerushalmi goes much further. It's better to burn the Torah than give it over to women. Why not? Why don't we treat it like any mitzvah say shizman grama that a woman's not chayiv and she could decide to do? Why don't we allow her to do this? So we have a Rambam, Hilchos Talmud Torah, Aleph Yud Gimel, which it says, I'm going to read it because I found it very interesting how it's written. Isha lomda Torah yesh la schar. A woman that learns Torah, she gets schar. He goes on for a couple lines explaining it's not the same schar as a man, because when you're commanded to do something and you do it, you get more schar if the Yetzer Hara fighting you. You get more schar than a woman who's not commanded in doing it, therefore the Yetzer Hara is not all up against her, so she'll get less schar, but she still has schar for learning Torah. Even though she has schar, Chazal still said, do not teach your daughter Torah. Why? Most women, their das isn't straight or correct, in line to learn it. And they're pretty much going to get it wrong. The Chacham say whoever teaches their daughter Torah is like teaching them tiflis. What is that? By Torah Shabbal Peh. That's when it's considered like you teach them the tiflis. That's when it's very bad. Aval Torah Shebiksav lo yamda isay lechatchila v'im lamda inim klam the tiflis. So the way that the Rambam comes is that you teaching Torah Shebiksav Peh, that's teaching tiflis. Teaching Torah Shebiksav, that is not tiflis, but you still shouldn't do it. And what's the reason? Because the women are going to get it wrong.
But it's interesting, we know a famous thing that the women have been no yisera l'anoshim.
Okay, so very good. So the question is that women have bina yisera, and the answer seemingly is we're not saying that women are stupid. Women they're wired differently. And since women are wired differently, then their brains are good for different things. For example, multitasking. Women are much better at multitasking than men, because that's how their brains are more wired. Now, you might want to ask, which is a good question, that nowadays we see lots of women being very successful in a lot of intellectual endeavors. So I'm going to get back to there in a second. But I just want to read you for a second the Shulchan Aruch in Yeridea, Reish Mem Vav, says a woman that learns Torah, that starts with almost word for word as the Rambam, and says that a woman who learns Torah, she has schar, but don't do it. That whole shtickle. But there's a Ramah. I want to tell you what the Ramah adds in. He says, Mikol Makim chayev isha limay dinim hasheichem leisha. A woman is chayev to learn those things which are shaykh to her. V'isha ena chayev limay espanay Torah, but she doesn't have to teach her kids, but whatever. Those dinim that are shaykh to her, she is chayev to learn. Okay, that's a new point, which wasn't brought until now. Let's speak a little bit more. The Maril says that, one more interesting thing that the Prisha says. Yeah? The Torah also echoes the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. So the the Prisha going on the Torah is bothered. How can it be that she shouldn't learn, but if she does learn, she gets schar? Something's very strange here. You're telling me that she shouldn't learn, and if she does learn, she gets schar. I mean, it's weird. I mean, if the Chum said don't learn, how is she getting schar for learning? Is she getting schar for going against what the Chum say? So I had a teretz personally, which the Prisha didn't say. The Maisa, since midaraisa, she's mekayim the mitzvah of learning, she gets schar. And the Rabbanan can't come and take that schar away from her. However, the Rabbanan come and say, don't do it, it's not a good idea. But at the end of the day, they're not uprooting the deraisa schar that she would get. That's how I want it to be mataretz. For the Lamdanim here, great. But the Prisha had different teretz. Zak the Prisha, he says that if she learns and she's part of the miyat woman that get it right, she'll get schar. But a father can't decide that he's going to teach his son and he's going to teach his daughter and assume she's part of the miyat. Meaning, most women will not get schar for learning Torah because most women will get it wrong. If she's part of the miyat, she'll get schar for learning, but the father has no right to assume that his daughter is part of the miyat, and therefore he shouldn't teach his daughter. So that's how the Prisha learns. The Maril says a different twist. We can't teach her. If she wants to go and learn by herself, she could. Rav Shach and the Mishnah Halachis, we're doing some Haredi sources over here, say she could decide to learn by herself. We don't teach her, it's very similar to the Maril, but she could decide to learn by herself. Now it's interesting because it seems from the main sources, the Rambam, the Torah, the Shulchan Aruch, the issue of teaching women is that they will get it wrong. Right? So for a woman to follow this Maril, this Rav Shach, this Mishnah Halachis, does she have to be confident that she's part of the miyat? Because they said, she can decide to learn by herself. And who decides whether you're part of the miyat exactly? How do you decide if she gets right pshat? Who's she supposed to tell her pshat to decide if she gets right pshat? Seemingly, they're letting her do it without a stempel of approval of being part of the miyat. So it's interesting to know. Fine. Now, it's interesting. A lot of people, I feel like 100 years ago, would have been very satisfied with these Mamre Kaimis and say women don't have the right type of brain to learn Torah. Nowadays, there's no shortage of the women doctors. There's no shortage of women attorneys. There's no shortage of women professors. So make a tasty that she doesn't have the right head for learning. So it's actually interesting. Apparently, they say that there's certain areas of intellect that women do not come close to men. And all the liberals are struggling to find explanations for this because, they believe men and women are exactly the same. So they're all struggling. Apparently, when it comes to, theoretical mathematics and theoretical applied physics and when it comes to the chess masters and when it comes to coding, in these things, men far excel above women. And the reason is because that's how men's mind work. And women's mind, generally, there are some women that have excelled in that, the miyat. But by and large, the women are not capable in those areas. So Torah, I guess, so to speak, fits in to those type of areas. Now, this seems a little strange. Just let's take a step back and see what's going on. We're saying that, in midrasa they can learn. And the Chum came along and said, no, they can't. Either because it's going to make them sly and lead to whatever type of behavior, or because they're not going to get it right. So I guess they originally did get it right, and I guess times changed. Maybe the world became a less sneeze place, more bad things went on, so you have to be more careful. Or I guess the intellect of women changed at a point and went down, and they weren't able to do these things anymore. Tzarechim. Now, I was thinking about something, I've taught many men in my life, or teenagers mostly, that, let's face it, they weren't going to get it either. I've taught them, I know already from my experience, chazaka, they're going to get the wrong shot every time. Whether it's based on effort, whether it's based on intellect, whatever it is. But, we're based on the Rambam. Don't teach women the way that he explains, because they're going to get it wrong. So can I not teach men who are going to get it wrong? Why am I allowed to teach men? I have some men that I've taught that probably wouldn't have done so well in theoretical physics either. You know what I'm saying? So, why can I teach them? So it seems to be that men who have an absolute chiyuv, they have to go for it. But women that don't have a chiyuv anyways, we don't want them learning if they're not going to get it right. That seems to be the chiluk between men and women. Why by women we're going to go and teach and okay, fine. By women we're not going to go and teach, and by men we will. Okay. Now, so what comes out from here so far is you shouldn't teach girls either Torah Shebiksav or Torah Sheba'al Peh. But teaching Torah Sheba'al Peh, that's really bad. That will lead to tiflis. But Torah Shebiksav, you're still not supposed to teach. The very pashut question that we have to ask ourselves is, what's going on in the Beis Yaakov system? You see that we're seemingly totally teaching girls, and we don't teach Torah Sheba'al Peh. We do teach them Torah Sheba'al Peh. They don't learn the Rashis and the Rambans and the Pshats and the Rashis quoting all the Gemaras, who darshan all the Psukim on the. We'll have to. Most of Torah Sheba'al Peh is on Torah Shebiksav. So, what's going on? And even if you're going to tell me they only learn Torah Shebiksav, which is not true. We just have the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, that they're not allowed to learn Torah Shebiksav. We're not supposed to teach them Torah Shebiksav. What is going on? Now we understand.
Actually, it's a chiddush that the Shulchan Aruch, because even if they got it wrong, who cares? Torah Shebiksav it says, so it doesn't destroy.
So the question is, you're asking.
Torah Sheba'al Peh, it could destroy. Yeah.
But you're asking, what is the reason? Really, you're asking a fundamental question. Why is it that the conclusion of the Rambam is not to teach them Torah Shebiksav? Seemingly, the way the Rambam is learning is that Gemara of the Gemara in the Bavli, in Soita, is saying that it's tiflis. That was only going on Torah Sheba'al Peh. So where's our source that they shouldn't learn Torah Shebiksav? Answer, I think the answer is the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi,
that it's going to burn.
Yeah. Torah should be burnt, and that seemingly wasn't going on Torah Sheba'al Peh. That was maybe even going on Torah Shebiksav, a simple question on Chumash. It was a simple question on Chumash, and the Rebbe said, stay in the kitchen. We don't need the Torah burnt. Now, maybe it's debatable, we don't, maybe the Yerushalmi is not pashut that we pass in that way, but I guess the Rambam might be going with it. And l'chayra, that's what it is based on. Now, but once again, seemingly we're not supposed to teach them anything. So what's with the Beis Yaakov system? Now we understand, we all grew up hearing, and Sarah Schneer started the Beis Yaakov system. I've even heard it explain going against the old way of thought and explaining we have a new generation of women who are ready to come and learn. Now we understand when there's pushback. When you start from the sugya, this was a problem. Lefi the sugya, we don't teach our daughters Torah. This Sarah Schneer Beis Yaakov idea seemingly is usher. And there were a lot of Rabbanim who were against it. And and when we look back in hindsight at history, we say, it was the greatest thing. But at the time, today, how did they do it? So the Chavetz Chaim in Likutei Halachos explains, we aren't living in a lechatchila situation. We aren't living in a lechatchila world. So nowadays, it's a mitzvah to teach them Tanakh, Sifrei Musar, and even Pirkei Avos, so they won't go astray. Eis Lassos Lashem. This is not the correct, not Lechatchila. Lechatchila is we don't teach them. But if we don't teach them, they're not going to be connected to Yiddishkeit. So we need to teach them for them to be connected to Yiddishkeit. Doesn't sound like a great thing to say in the video, trying to raise money to build a new Beis Yaakov. Here, we're building the B'diavad thing that Nebuch we have to do to have a Beis Yaakov. Nebuch. Once again, the Chafetz Chaim says it's a mitzvah to do it, but from the sugya, it's not l'chatchila. It's the necessary b'diavad, which I think a lot of people will find very surprising. Now, apparently in Satmar, in the Satmar Beis Yaakov, they just teach Chumash. Maybe they'll speak out a Rashi, but definitely they won't look at a Rashi inside. They're not going to speak out all these Rishayim. They're not going to do all this stuff. They'll learn Chumash. As the Satmar Rebbe explained, people think the Chafetz Chaim came around and he was Mater Yisurim. The Chafetz Chaim wasn't Mater Yisurim. He was only Mater when there was a need. He was never Mater learning Rashi and the Ramban and all the more. He was never Mater. He was Mater when there was a need. You could teach some Torah Shebeksav. But that's it. And all these other people have taken it way too far. That's what the Satmar Rebbe said.
Musar, you can't teach them?
Musar, yes. But we're talking about limudim, above and beyond.
So Pirkei Avos is allowed to teach.
So Pirkei Avos, the Chiddush of the Chafetz Chaim is that Pirkei Avos, even though it's Mishnayos, but it's a Musar Dikah Mishnayos, and therefore you're allowed to teach it. Fine.
And Nevi'im and Ksubim also you could teach?
Yeah, Nevi'im and Ksubim as
But in Satmar they didn't do Nevi'im.
I don't think they do. I think they just do Chumash.
Why not Nevi'im?
They're not looking to do more than they have to. Keep it as basic as possible. That was the aside. The Sefer Levi says, I don't understand why they teach so much in our Beis Yaakov system. Because it's a mitzvah, I guess it depends by places, but what I'm familiar with, they teach a lot of stuff. They're teaching stuff about Karbanas, Yisro's 7 names were whatever, and all these midrashim behind everything, and they're teaching, all these. This Bezdin is 23 for Dinei Nefashis, and that about Karbanas, and this about Nazir, and all the stuff which is well beyond what they generally need. So what's going on with that? So there's a sefer as Naim Mishpat, which says they could learn the maskenas of the Gemara. So maybe that's part of it, but it's still a Kaddish. We seemingly teach a lot more than that. So there's one of the explanations, and I guess we'll call it Heterim, come from Rav Yashaber. Now Rav Yashaber says, nowadays that women have been allowed into academia. They've been allowed into the world of education. And we see women nowadays have positions as professors and the like. So, therefore, if we don't give them access to the brilliance of Torah, and we don't let them flex their mental muscles with Torah, they're going to come and flex their mental muscles in the wrong places. They're going to go to universities, the Goyish universities, and they're going to go to the Goyish world, and that's where they're going to chase their ambitions of academia. And therefore, we have to teach them here. Just like the Ramah says, you're allowed to teach them Hilchos Shabbos, so that they can keep Shabbos. We need to teach them all different types of Chachmas HaTorah, and all different types of Torah Sheba'al Peh, and all different types of whatever it may be. Teach them Lamdas Reb Chaim, whatever it is. We have to teach them Torah in order that they'll keep Shabbos. Just like you're allowed to teach Hilchos Shabbos so they keep Shabbos, we can teach them all sorts of other things in order that they'll keep Shabbos. And that was the mindset of Yeshiva. The question is how far to take it. I don't know. I was just being extreme when I said the Lamdas Lamdas of Rav Chaim. I don't know how far Rav Yosheber meant, I'm not really sure. But I think this Rav Yosheber type of mindset, to some degree, has made it into our system. We need the girls to be challenged. We need the girls to be busy and focused on their learning. It's a good thing for them to be involved in. We don't want them to get up to bad things, etc. These types of mindset. Therefore, it's best for the Yiddishkeit for them to be busy learning this, even though, min adin, it's not so pashut. So I think that's the idea that the system relies on. Now, would the Ramah endorse a woman's bas b'chalav koil in the morning? Once again, he said they're allowed to learn what's shaykh to them. Bas b'chalav, yeah, it's shaykh. In a way, I don't want to sound too progressive, but it would be much more convenient if the woman could answer the bas b'chalav shaylas than the man, because she's hanging out in the kitchen. Maybe this woman who's in koil isn't, but could we have a woman's bas b'chalav? Let's say, keep it simple. For retiree women, for women that their kids are already out of the house, could they have a bas b'chalav call? Would the Ramah endorse it? So at first I thought, l'chayra, yes. Once again, putting my preconceived notions on the wayside. I first thought, yes, the Ramah would endorse it, because they're allowed to learn what's shaykh to them, so let them learn it. But then I was medayik in the Ramah. The Ramah is a lashon, Mikol makom chayev isha limnoid dinim hashaychim leisha. She's allowed to learn the laws that are shaykh to the isha. Why are you throwing the words laws? He shows us the Torah that is shaykh to the woman. Why the dinim? The vart that the Ramah seems to be saying with that, writing that she's allowed to learn the dinim as opposed to learning the Torah, she can learn the end of the day halachas. Halacha l'maisa. She's not meant to be sitting there in a bas b'chalav koil, handling every base mayor.
How come in Satmar the Beis Yaakov don't teach actually the halacha l'maisa?
So once again, the Satmar Rebbe explained very well. They're the pashtus. Satmar is the pashtus. He says it's not necessary, and if it's not necessary, and we can get away with it, our women are okay. Our women aren't, they're not so affected by the world, and therefore, we're not looking to teach anything extra.
But how can they know Shabbos and all the other stuff?
No, they teach all that. That they teach. That's the Ramah. They teach halacha.
In Satmar they do.
In Satmar they do teach halacha.
Because you told us.
Halacha that's shaykh. No, I'm saying Chumash is the only thing that they learn which isn't pure halacha. Yeah.
So halachas they do teach.
Yeah. When it comes to like hashkafa and musar, that I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay, so that is the idea for bas b'chalav. That is the idea for whether or not it's a mitzvah to teach women Torah. And I have another bit on women saying kaddish. The question is, do we have time for this? Should we go for women saying kaddish, or do you think we have time or not really?
Yeah, we have time.
Okay, fine. All right, so let's go for it. So I don't know my notes as prepared, but let's go for it. Can a woman say kaddish? So if you're from places like Lakewood and Flatbush and Muncie and Yerushalayim and Belgium and places like this, Switzerland, you might say Zurich, obviously not. Chas v'sholom. Women saying kaddish, that's for the reform. Nobody would ever think of it. But if you're from, Teaneck and the young Israel of wherever, and somebody was just telling me Hollywood, Florida, he grew up in, and many different places around, and I've seen it a couple of times in my life, in places that are Orthodox, women saying kaddish. What is up with that? Well, what is wrong with that? So let's take a deep dive. First of all, what's kaddish? Kaddish Yosem is a relatively newer addition. It wasn't something that we see in the Gemara that you're supposed to do. The Makar there's a story, I'll skip the Makar because we're running late. So, one thing that the Rehenkin points out, which is very important, the Iker Luli Nishmas is the Meisim Tovim. The Torah learned, the tzedakah given, the Meisim Tovim, the tshuva, that's the Iker Luli Nishmas. The kaddish is the throw-on, it's an additional benefit. Don't get too caught up in the kaddishim and forget about the mitzvahs, the Meisim Tovim. Fine. And don't be marbe b'kaddish, is what he says. Now, fine. Rav Sternbach, by the way, are you allowed to have multiple people saying Kaddish? Of course! That's what happens everywhere. By the end of the davening, in every minyan, especially if there's older people in the minyan, or it's a bigger minyan, you have 6 people saying Kaddish at the same time. Now, historically, it was not like this. Historically, before 100 years ago, the way that it worked was one person said Kaddish at a time. Maybe you switched off. He said Kaddish after Aleinu, and he said Kaddish maybe after the Yom or something like that. But one person saying Kaddish at a time. At some point in the last 100 years, it's developed that in most places you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people all saying Kaddish together. But even nowadays, there are places where you just have one person saying Kaddish. Huh? It's Shitas HaShulchan Aruch.
Wow.
It's Shitas everything. It's Shitas everybody until 100 years ago. But you have places in Broyers, the Yekis, and you have places like in Panovich. I know somebody was telling me in Minyan in San Merchevet they have this. Some places still hold strong with this idea of only one person says Kaddish. But the minhag is certainly developed in most places that you have multiple people saying Kaddish. Rav Sternbach's not happy with it. He says Shnei koiler mishtame. You can't hear 2 koilers. The Chazon Ish was very makbid on this. The Yekis, as we said, are makbid on it. And L'maisa, if everybody's going to say Kaddish, it's a good minhag, which they have in some places, that everybody at least comes to the middle together to say it together. So at least with saying it together, it's easier to follow. Okay. So back to women saying Kaddish. When did this story start? There's no way they did this in the olden days, right? Well, first source is the Chavas Yair. What does the Chavas Yair say? He says a story of in Amsterdam. There was somebody that died without any sons. And he told his daughter to say Kaddish for him in his house. He paid to gather men to come, I don't know exactly how often, to his house. They'll learn in his house. And his daughter, because he had those sons, will say Kaddish for him. So is that okay? Is that the Chavas Yair? L'chayra, it is okay. L'chayra, it's okay. But I'm nervous to where this will lead. Minhag Yisrael Torah. And the Minhag Yisrael is women don't say Kaddish. Because I'm nervous. This time she'll say Kaddish. Next week it's going to be Baruch Hu. The week after that it's going to be the Haftarah. And before you know it, she's giving the Shabbos HaGadol drasha. So Tefillin's a whole different parsha. I'll get to that. One day I'll get to that. But that's a different discussion, Tefillin. Now, therefore, no Kaddish. And by the way, it's not like the Chavas Yair was anti-women. I actually just heard. I always thought it was a strange name of a sefer, Chavas Yair. So Yair was one of his names, and his grandmother was Chava. And he held of his grandmother like she was the Gadol Adar, what he writes about his grandmother. Chava. So he decided to name his sefer Chavas Yair. And that's how we get the name. Chavas Yair. So he wasn't anti-women, this Chavas Yair. But he said, 1700s, no way, we can't do this. The Tshuva Mahava. So the Tshuva Mahava was a Talmud of the biggest Talmud of the Nogdim Yehuda. He was asked a very similar question. Can the daughter say Kaddish in the house? So he said, well, in Prague, there was a minhag that you used to have the Zakanim and the Zakanis and the blind people. They would all sit in the chutzner of the shul, and they would say Tehillim all day. And somebody who died without sons, you would have one of his young daughters, 5, 6, 7 years old, and she would go, and when they finished whatever of Tehillim, she would go and say Kaddish there. And it was a minhag yafa. But to go and bring that into the shul, and have women come into the shul to say Kaddish, that is like bringing a pesel into the shul. And even a 5-year-old girl, it's like bringing a pesel in the shul, and no way could we do it. Okay. Hold on one second. Okay, Lamaisa, the Shvus Yaakov, he actually allows saying Kaddish in a house. He allows the woman to say Kaddish in the house. The Chavas Yar, it was brought in the Piskei Tshuva, says, in halacha, there's no be'etzim problem, but who knows where this is going to lead. And therefore we have to stay away. The Beis Lachem Yehuda said, there's no place for it. It's a shtus. It's worthless. It's useless. No place for women saying Kaddish whatsoever. The Shari Tshuva says that when there's no son, you're allowed to do it in the house. The Bir Hativ, he brings the Knesset Yehuda, that says, once again, at home, a woman could say Kaddish. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, he quotes both minhagim. He says, some are noig that you could say it in the house, some are noig you can't say it in the house. So it seems to be a long machlokes. The Ben Ish Chai brings a story very similar to the story of the Chavas Yar. And somebody died, and I guess he was a wealthy guy. He arranged for a kollel, 10 people to be learning in his house, and he instructed his daughter to say Kaddish at the end of their learning session. And it seemed like it was going to be every day. So she asked the Ben Ish Chai what he thinks about it, and should she listen to her father's dying wish? And the Ben Ish Chai said, no way, we don't do this. No chance. Okay. The Mat Ephraim had also a case of somebody that had no sons and a daughter and wanted to say Kaddish, and he said we should protest against it. She shouldn't do it. So, fine. And he says, by the way, the Mat Ephraim, even though it doesn't fit into Kol B'Isha Erva, I'm not coming from Kol B'Isha Erva. It's just the wrong thing to do. Okay, so now, seemingly, in-house is a long old hak, whether a woman could say Kaddish in the house. What about in shul? So far everybody said no way. Zakt Rav Henkin, who was the biggest paisik in America in the 30s, 40s, 50s, in that time period. He was the paisik before Moshe became the paisik. Rav Henkin was the paisik. So Rav Henkin said, he was asked if a girl could say Kaddish, a young girl could say Kaddish, and I imagine he wrote this in 1947. I'm guessing in that time there were lots of Yisomim around in the post-Holocaust era. So he was asked if a young girl could say Kaddish, and he said in shul, and he allowed. Why did he allow? There's another tshuva in 1964. I'll just pretty much combine these two tshuvas, and he allows it because for 3 reasons. First of all, he says, when I was a kid back in Europe, I don't know where from in Europe, I remember that women said Kaddish, and nobody was Meicha. There were Yereim and Chasidim, and nobody was Meicha. Once again, that's not a strong proof that it's allowed, but he's testifying that it existed. Maybe it wasn't rampant, but it existed. Number 2 is, it used to be Al Pi Din Shulchan Aruch, as we know, one person, as I mentioned earlier, one person said Kaddish. If one person's saying Kaddish, and that one person is a woman who's saying Kaddish, and there's a whole tzibur of men listening and answering to the woman saying Kaddish, that's a lack of tznius. Maybe that's Kol Isha, even one could claim, but probably not, but at least it's a lack of tznius to highlight the woman. But nowadays, that the minhag is in the high majority of shuls, that you don't have one person saying kaddish. Whoever needs to say kaddish says kaddish. You can have 5 people saying kaddish together. That's what happens all over the place. So if the woman's saying kaddish with the men, nish geferlich. She's not drawing any major attention to herself. The men are going to be louder than her. She'll say kaddish with them. Nish geferlich. And therefore it's not such a big deal. And number 3 is when a woman wants to come to shul and she wants to do something from. As long as, I forgot she added it in this, as long as she's somebody, she keeps kashrus, she keeps Shabbos, she's wearing Big Day Tznuah, and she's not wearing Big Day America. Yeah, Big Day America in 1964 wasn't Big Day America in 2026, you know what I'm saying? She's wearing Big Day Tznius, not Big Day America, as Rav Henkin writes, yeah. So then you see that she's coming from a standpoint of, she's trying. Let her, don't push her away from Yiddishkeit. Bring her in, and let her say kaddish. And he even says, really, she should be saying it from the ladies section. But if she kind of gets in over there and she wants to say it from the back of the shul, you don't need to be moicha. He's not saying that he advises it, but he's not.
But it's a lack of tznius of the back of the bismedrash.
Once again, that's what he seems to be not. She's not going to the bima. She's in the back corner.
Back corner, but still.
So once again, he didn't advise her to be in the back corner, but he's not being moicha.
Why is he not being moicha? I don't understand.
Don't be moicha. Don't push her away. It's an Indian of kiruv. Nowadays, you got to realize the world that was going on. You got to realize the intermarriage that was going on. You got to realize the going off the derech that was going on at that point. If she wants to be from, don't push her away.
And he wasn't afraid that the next day she could put on tefillin.
I guess he made a call that this was more important to bring her in. Fine. It's always a hard cheshbon to make, how to treat the masses. Okay, weiter. The Minchas Yitzchak asked him, Rav Henkin, wait a second, how could she say kaddish from the women's section? You can't say kaddish from a different rishus. You're allowed to answer to a kaddish when you're in a different rishus, if you're in a different room. But from a different rishus, how could you say kaddish? How could you say kaddish? You can't say if you don't have a minion with you. There's only a minion of 10 men. She's not with the 10 men in the ladies section. How could she say kaddish? So I saw that the grandson of Rav Henkin answers that you got to understand, not all Ezra's Nashims were created equal. If you have Ezra's Nashim that's like a different room and there's a window open to the men's section, ain't a chanami. From there she can't say kaddish because she's in a totally different rishus. But if you go to your classic old big shul in Young Israel or wherever, and you see how the shuls are made up, the old school American shuls, there are these big rooms and there's a little mechitza. Is the mechitza kosher in halacha? Yes, it's kosher. But l'maisa, it's one room. And if it's l'maisa, it's one room, she could say kaddish. And the chayr, it's a decent argument.
How's the mechitza kosher?
10 tvachim. If you have a mechitza of 10 tvachim, it's kosher. But l'maisa, if you look overall, it's one room. So therefore, that's how Rav Henkin's grandson answers to defend Rav Henkin. I want to point out something that I saw which disturbed me. I saw somebody quoting Rav Moshe Feinstein as saying that he is mater for women to say kaddish. So I decided to look up the Rav Moshe, because he wasn't being quoted all over, but I saw one sefer quote him. So I opened up the Igros Moshe, and it was in Hilchas Mechitza. And Rav Moshe says that if you have 1 or 2 women there by a minyan that's not kavua, then it's fine. You don't need a mechitza by a minyan that's not kavua if there's 1 or 2 women there. So if there's 1 or 2 women who are cleaning or came to say kaddish, so you don't need a mechitza. Fine. So that was the source that I saw quoted that Rav Moshe allows women to say kaddish. In a shul. That Rav Moshe allows women to say kaddish in a shul. And I think that is a bad quote of Rav Moshe for 3 reasons. Once again, not one of these reasons, but there's 3 issues. First of all, it was in one of the later volumes of Rav Moshe that was written after he was nifter. So I don't know for sure if Rav Moshe wanted this one printed. That's number 1. And when it's controversial, then maybe there's a chashash that Rav Moshe didn't want to print it. Number 2 is Rav Moshe didn't necessarily say he's okay with women saying kaddish. He was talking about hilchas mechitza. He said if she came to say kaddish, you don't need a mechitza. It doesn't mean that he holds she should say kaddish. Rav Moshe knew what was going on in the world. He knew that there were people that relied on Rav Henkin. He wasn't using this tshuva to pick a fight with Rav Henkin. He was saying that, and if some woman wants to say kaddish like Rav Henkin allows, l'maisa hilchas mechitza, you don't need a mechitza. It doesn't prove that he's fine with them saying kaddish. And point number 3 is that this whole case of Rav Moshe was by a temporary Araydik minion. So seemingly it wasn't talking about the minion in shul. It was talking about the minion by the chasana or whatever it was. Oh, but the minion by the chasana, the not shul minion, if the woman wants to say kaddish, maybe she could. That doesn't prove that he allows it in the shul, and therefore I think that is a mitzvah. Just to add on to the things that are interesting, the Neta Gavriel and the Gesher Chaim were completely against it. And once again, I think everybody could keep with their minhagim. If you don't know what your minhag is, stay away from it. A woman, better to pay somebody else to say kaddish, better to give tzedakah, better to daven, say tehillim, whatever. This is not really the thing to do. But l'maisa, for those that have the minhag, there is what to be samech on, but it's definitely in mainstream Klal Yisrael, this is not the way to go. And there is a Rav Henkin to be samech on, but if you don't have a strong push to do it, I would stay away. And furthermore, if I was asked whether somebody should do it, my answer would somewhat be dependent on where I think it's coming from. If I think it's coming from feminism, for sure, stay away. If it's coming from, I just wanted to do something L'ilui Nishmas, it's not the worst thing in the world. Okay, thank you for listening.